Welcome to Indie Talk today here at the Dakotan. Jonathan Starr, Kyler Collom, and
That's me.
Marvin Nelson. Thanks for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
We look forward to discussing some pressing topics going on at the state legislature, and you've got plenty of experience doing that, having served in the legislature yourself and also running for governor at one point.
Yeah, I got it cut down to where there was probably only 30 or 40 things left that I wanted to do before I left.
Well done, well done. So I think the biggest question is this. What day are they going to be done?
Does it end next Friday?
Well, I'll have to tell a story to start right with then.
Good.
It was that one session, and everybody was picking a date, and I picked June 15th.
Okay.
And everybody looks at me and they go, what? I said, there ain't no way we're getting this done.
Yeah.
But we have to get it done like 2 weeks before July 1st because all the laws have to take effect.
Gotcha.
I missed by 1 day because Al Carlson went out of the session with that bill in his pocket. And I'd hit it exactly, except the Republicans ran a fundraising golf tournament
Well, yes.
that day.
Yes, they must.
So they got the people to pay for their travel in to go to
Gotcha.
golf to raise money, and then we met the next day.
I
Of
see.
course.
But
it's the golf trip's fault that you got it wrong.
I actually at this point think there's enough pushing back and forth that it's back to they're going to use 80 days. Whether they officially use 80 days or not, I'm not so sure because they do this thing like today where they're not gaveling in, so they don't count it as a day.
It doesn't technically count. And
It's kind of the old throw the screen over the clock. It doesn't really happen.
How do you feel about that? Like, is this? Should we change how the legislature rules are there, where they can have more days, or should they just make it where committee days count? Or
well, I believe even when they use 80 days, there should be a clause in the Constitution that this legislature could call themselves into a special emergency session for 5 or 7 days or whatever.
Okay.
That option should remain open. Even, because it's always this thing of you're trying to get the governor to call you back. The governor doesn't want to call you back.
Right, yeah.
And
Just
then
turns into
when the
a
governor
runaround.
calls you back, then it's unlimited days.
Oh,
and I'm
gotcha.
not really a big fan of that either.
Yeah,
There's a flip side there, yeah.
Yeah, so I think there should be something, and they get stuck with this, but it's back to they have a certain pace. So when this committee goes, when that committee goes, and so on. So you'll hear all these people say, "Oh, we'll be done 2 weeks early," and it can't happen because they don't run at that pace to get there. So they use basically all the time,
Right.
and they may end up with 2 or 3 days officially. You can do a special session supposedly in 3 days.
Okay. That's fast paced.
But
Allegedly, it can get done in that time.
well, it's kind of
Yeah. For a legislature that takes 80 days plus a lot of committee days to get this done, then they can have a special session in 3 days and it's enough time. Interesting.
Well, and the way the special sessions have operated is this pre-printed is what's going in, and my bill. Too bad about that.
Yeah.
It's not going in.
Sorry.
It's
Makes
just like
sense.
the delayed bills committee there. And it's not official policy anymore that Democrat bills won't pass like it was when Al Carlson was there. It was official policy that our bills won't pass. But
There's a chance that it could pass.
yeah,
now.
I got actually trained, so I'd put my bills in early, hoping that a Republican would steal the idea and have
gotcha.
time to get it in.
That's the supermajority you love to see.
Oh yeah, it's just and that's kind of the problem is like now and like I said before, you have these spending bills and they come, and what happens is the conference committee's working and the staff is typing furiously, and your computer would sit there and hear the largest bills of the whole session with all these wonderful amendments on it pops up, and literally the gavel falls
Gotcha.
within a couple minutes. The carrier gets up and speaks a little bit, answers some questions. You better know what's going on beforehand. And then you vote on a $200 million bill.
Right. Yeah.
And there is
That's
absolutely
crazy.
no way to read that bill or do anything.
No,
and,
they drop
and,
something 70 pages on you and say you have to vote.
I always kid that it's like, if I vote for this, I can go home? Yes. Okay.
This is how we need to be able to leave at this point.
That's fine.
It's Friday afternoon. We've been here all week. I want to go home for the weekend.
that one session, I remember coming out of the building. I think it was 5:45.
Okay.
Which AM, PM?
AM.
AM. Yeah.
It took its time.
Yeah, the boxes of pizzas were hot.
Yeah, there was a couple of them,
I'm
You're
sure.
not supposed to sleep at your desk.
but
Yeah,
a couple may or may not have
You
a
can,
dose.
Are you allowed to like scroll Instagram and stuff like that?
Well, there's all these rules on electronic devices and cell phones and stuff, but I won't say that they're if they're not in floor session, then certainly you can't.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
You know, but you see a lot of guys during floor
Yeah.
session down
right.
on the phone.
Yeah, I
you
sat
know.
there. There was one day I sat there and I was just watching some people, and they had their phone right on their computer screen, and so then they're able to just be scrolling their phone, looking at whatever they want to look at.
Like
and,
you're looking at their computer the whole
Yeah.
time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's not like the good old days where I could kick my slimline phone off
Yeah.
accidentally while I was wiggling around. You know.
Yes.
Yeah, the funniest one was the one guy. He had a pail of water there, and he kicked the phone off into the pail of water and sat in it overnight. So
Oh no,
That's
it
terrible.
was completely done for at that
That's
point.
hilarious.
So yeah, so it was something. But yeah, you were supposed to use that hand phone during floor session, but everybody got more and more. And
Yeah.
it's not, you know, it used to be like a phone would ring during a committee meeting, and it was really disruptive. And now somebody's phone rings during committee meeting. And goes, oh,
Yeah.
It
Oh,
doesn't-
yeah.
it's not even
Fix
I
a
do
it.
this a few hundred times
Yeah.
already.
Yeah.
No big deal.
This session alone. Yeah.
So one of the questions that you like to ask a lot, which is a good
You're
question.
gonna beat me to it.
All right, ask it then.
Is a lot of talk that's happened is and it was shot down this year and it's been shot down in the past, moving the session to a yearly deal. Is that what you were going to say?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, you knew what I was going for.
Well,
Have you had any thoughts on that?
That could all be done because it just says 80 days of biennium.
Yeah.
They wouldn't need to pass anything,
Okay, I see.
really, as far as they meet. I actually have thought that we could probably do a better job if you met 3 days every month
Sure.
Oh,
and just
interesting.
on a continuous basis.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as sessions go, you know, like Minnesota does the bonding one year and not the other. I don't know how you could get a session done when you have to give everything a hearing, vote on everything in 40 days or 20 days. I really don't see how it's workable that way. I think it'd be more of a continuous type of thing where the standing committees just remain going, and you maybe have a few of their own meetings, but
You convene every few
then
months
you can
to
convene, like I say, once a month for 2 days or something like that. I could see that working, but I really can't see split 80 days into 2 years and make it work.
Sure.
I see.
That's fair. That's reasonable, I think. I know that's just one of those things that's come up quite a bit, especially with the sheer volume of bills that came into the session this year, having like 1,100 submitted. And
Yeah, well, I always said anybody who puts in more than 10 bills is crazy, and I always put in more than 10 bills.
So how does it feel to be crazy?
You go in there with, a couple in mind, and then lo and behold, it
Yeah,
turns
well, I
into
never
15.
got to cross anything off the list.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
You got to try every year then at that
Yeah,
stage.
and then there's things you don't put in, and then people jump you. Oh, you're not even supporting us. You're not even putting it in, and it's like, it's
How
not
do you
even worth
win?
me putting the bill in unless you're going to fill the Capitol that day.
Right, yeah.
Hearing.
Exactly.
Got to pack the halls that way.
Because I did that many times where you stand, rah-rah for some group or stuff, and you're standing at the podium all by yourself,
Yeah.
and you know where that's going to go.
Yeah.
Best case, an 80-12 vote kind of thing.
If they're nice to you, the committee will let you get out of the room before they kill the bill.
Nice. Yeah. So,
If they like you a little bit.
Yeah.
So this session has been full of, as any session is, twists and turns, ups and downs. What has been maybe one of the topics or bills or whatever that stood out to you the most? Maybe it passed, maybe it didn't, maybe it's still pending, like property taxes. What's one of the maybe one or two bills that really stood out to you?
Well, the property taxes are, they were predicted 20 years ago when it became the goal to eliminate. We had a three-legged stool of property sales and income tax. And then the goal became eliminate the income tax leg. And the Democrats said, you eliminate the income tax. And I remember George Sinner, he worked very hard to keep property tax down below 1%.
Okay.
That was his very rigid, you know.
And income, if I'm not mistaken, income taxes rose at that stage.
Well,
at least
they did,
partially.
you know?
Yeah.
But basically, it was a third. And
Sure.
we sat there and said, "You cut the income tax. The balloon's got to push out someplace else." Well, where it's pushed out has been property tax.
Okay.
But we get the same thing, the same response. Oh, the income tax has nothing to do with the property tax. Oh, the legislature has nothing to do with the property tax.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, they have a lot to do with the property tax.
actually,
Come to find out.
You know, unfunded mandates. You know, we love them. We
Right,
just
yeah.
love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's been a lot of push, especially more so during Burgum's governorship, to eliminate income taxes in the state. Do you think that's going to end up happening in the end, or do you think it's likely going to end up staying kind of where it's at?
Well, it really puts us in a dangerous position. They're so low now. I mean, in my entire time in the legislature, never once got a phone call from somebody saying my state income tax is too high.
Right.
So why do we spend all our time on something that nobody that I know complains about?
Yeah.
It's a little bit like picking on these transgender students as the thing that's going to make women safe at a time in the state where, depending on whose statistics you use, from 1 in 20 to 1 in 4 are sexually abused. Why don't we work on what's actually happening?
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, for sure.
Focus on problems.
I think that's one thing that the Democratic Party in the state is struggling with currently, and how to express itself better too.
That's true, because but it's like we end up, some group gets attacked and then you stand up and you defend them, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to defend somebody else.
Right.
Exactly.
It's just that here's his people getting attacked, and how many transgender rapes have we had in bathrooms and locker rooms in the state? Right. I don't know of a single one. Why are we spending all this time on that when we do have real problems?
Actual, physical issues that are happening.
Preemptive stuff.
Yeah.
So going back to property taxes, do you feel like this is something that does need reform or relief, or is it something where it's just...
Well, I think the proper thing to do was the state should have done a better job of funding the mandates over time.
Right.
It's like there's this whole tree of things that ends up then falling onto property taxes. And that was part of my thoughts when I said the state should take over school construction, because sooner or later everybody needs a school. And it's so uneven whether districts can afford to do it or not. People often vote down the first two until you finally get a school that's really not functional from the first day it opens.
Sure.
That's not a good solution either.
Lo and behold, not the ideal situation.
Yeah, so that was the thing, is that part of it was property tax reform. The state's supposed to provide for that uniform system of public education. You just take a small drive around the state, there are school buildings that are affecting kids. Some kids are in really good buildings. Some kids are in really poor buildings.
Right.
And it's not uniform.
No,
and
that's a good point. How is one able to actually discern or differentiate from one to the other?
Yeah, and the states that have done it, and there's about a dozen, maybe a few more now, they all get sued over equity, and they all lose. But North Dakota is such a small state that the law firms suing everybody haven't gotten there yet.
Of course.
And
they haven't worked their way here yet.
Because we wouldn't stand up a moment in court. But the thing is what they do is you have a committee that's permanent, that's in charge, usually put in DOT, never put in the education department, because they know nothing about construction.
Okay, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's the basis of
Fair.
it.
Right.
Okay.
And then, I know Wyoming evaluates every school in the state every 2 years.
Okay.
And is it large enough for the number of students? Is there some physical plant problem that's coming up in maintenance or stuff like that? And then the state, and this is where they've used a lot of their coal money, the state then builds this. And they build athletic facilities and everything. They have really nice schools in Wyoming.
Wow. That's
Wyoming's a smaller and arguably more conservative place than North Dakota.
Oh yeah,
is,
they actually do have some conservatives in office.
Do they have a balance?
We'll stay on property taxes before we get onto that one further. Well, of the bills that have been presented, obviously the one that's gained the most notoriety is 1176, the quote governor's bill, and it's been torn apart at this point in committee.
Yeah,
exactly. So does this actually help North Dakotans at this point? Like, is this just another Band-Aid that is going to get put on this and is going to be told to North Dakotans this is supposed to help you and it really doesn't, or what's going to happen here?
Well, there's a lot of things that figure in. special assessments aren't property tax.
Right.
So they get covered or not. Special assessments are huge in the eastern border of the state. And then as you go west in the state, they tend to
Almost
disappear.
nothing.
And, But, we hear rumors that maybe they pop up in Minot. Who knows?
Once in a while,
Well,
though.
Minot you had the problem with the flood and
Yeah.
everything, so you're pretty high. And that's like this Hub City bill that goes in.
Yeah.
Who's getting most of the money? Williston and Dickinson.
They're getting
the two large cities in the state with the lowest property taxes of all the large cities.
They're getting like 80% of it or something.
Yeah, and most of it to Williston. And you go there and, what has happened in those cities is the city took on the debt what, if you were in Fargo, would have ended up on somebody's special assessment.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So effectively, the Hub City bills, as far as I can tell, are paying the special assessments in low special assessment cities of Dickinson and Williston.
It's just refunding the cities for the debt that they're taking on for the special assessments at that point.
And it's mean going to Williston. I mean, if you go to Williston and stay in a hotel, you'll probably pay more in taxes and fees than you pay for the hotel room.
Wow.
And what are you doing? That's the community center with the splash park and everything like that. And they're not doing anything for the travelers. So there's all these different things come in. The airport's out in the middle of the country.
Well, it was the city was going to build up to it, right?
Yeah, kind of like when Watford City expanded 4 miles in 1 year.
Oh man,
that's maybe next century sometime.
Yeah, that's huge.
They created the most expensive city to maintain the streets in the state.
Wow.
That's incredible. Well, and it spiked from like 2,000 to like 10,000 people in a couple of years.
There's a lot of people there.
I mean, and compared to that too, I think there's like almost half of what it was.
And I remember when they put the first bypass in, I said, every time we build a bypass, everybody plops their business on the bypass till you can't drive on the bypass. And the person I'm talking to goes, Walmart just broke ground.
Another one.
That's hilarious.
Dollar General's next.
And like mine at here, the south bypass is supposed to go just south of the experiment station.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. So it sounds like to me that it's not necessarily that we need property tax reform. It's more that we need cut our spending. That might be the better deal.
Do it differently. And I agree with the cut the spending. I never realized when I was watching the cracker come over the Rocky Mountains out to Montana that tar would get so costly.
Sure.
Well, we have in the pipeline through eastern North Dakota, we have thousands of barrels of tar pass through the state every day.
Mm-hmm.
How come we can't have a little specialty refinery that just takes it out, keeps the bitumen for the tar, and puts the rest back in the pipeline?
Instead of the state collecting a percentage of dollars of the profit that goes through it, why not just collect a small amount of the tar itself?
Yeah, I mean,
in payment.
Some of those, and it does seem, what happened, if you remember when the oil patch hit, then instead of sending the money out as it came, they held it back. We asked for a special session, and then we ended up with a huge amount of money went out of time. And suddenly, we got the same amount we would have gotten done with a lot less money before because everything just exploded in price.
Gotcha.
But it doesn't seem like anything went back down.
Right.
And even now, it's like the library. Yeah. The cost keeps escalating because it's a multi-year project.
Yeah,
so you bid the first year and you didn't bid the second year? Or
how's that play out?
Work?
Sounds familiar.
It's kind of like the heritage stuff. They said, and they were using it mostly to cut the unions out of the whole thing. Design build, it's so wonderful. It's never behind. It never goes over budget. It works great. And I'm standing there going, isn't the Heritage Center a design build? And aren't we like 6 months behind schedule already?
That's not the point. That's different though.
That's different though, yeah. The theory's okay, but you got to hold people to it.
Actually, you got to put the feet to the fire to actually make sure it happens.
And I do think, like when there was a lot of that money, it does seem strange to me in our bidding process and stuff that we don't rate companies at all.
Yeah.
Somebody who's somebody who runs the street by here and you're back out repairing it a year later because people
Right.
Sure.
they should have a few divots on their rating.
rating.
At least
Yeah,
a couple
for sure.
asterisks next to
Yeah.
them
Right.
or
Yeah.
something.
Something.
And stuff. So there doesn't seem to be this necessarily really good oversight for stuff. The other thing we could do to cut spending by millions of dollars, many millions of dollars, is we could quit cutting the divots down the middle of the rural highways.
Okay.
It takes at least 10 years off the life of a highway
Wow.
Really?
because it holds the water there.
I see.
And then that's where the crack is. And if you go on most of these rural highways and drive 20 minutes after rain, half of those divots are gone. The water's gone.
Okay.
Where did it go? It went in the road.
Okay.
And then the
Starts
freezing
eroding it.
happens, and
And
it lifts
expands
that
it
up,
up.
and then the snowplow
Right.
grips
Starts
that off.
nicking it off.
Yep.
Yep.
And then you end up with these big holes, and it's supposed to be a public safety. But if you look at it, some of the unsafest highways in the state are unsafe because of those cuts
Interesting.
down the middle of the highway.
So
Interesting.
one argument on that I've heard is that North Dakota has too many roads to maintain. Do you think it's more that they should just be maintained more efficiently then?
Well, that's a big part of it. And I mean, I know the report we would get from our own people would say we're $200 to $300 million short on maintenance every year. And a road is such that if you go too long, then you have to replace it instead of
Right.
maintaining
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
So,
There's a fine balance to try
and
to
I
work
did
with that.
on some of this, I wanted to make it so for cities and counties and stuff, there was a significant cost share for maintenance of roads. But if you got to build the road, that's too bad.
Okay.
Interesting.
And as an incentive to maintain the infrastructure that's in
Yeah.
the state.
Right.
Because the way it is now, it isn't the way it works.
Sure.
Right. For
Yeah.
sure.
And especially, like I say, the special assessment happy cities, it doesn't go on their budget anyway. They just assess it to the homeowners. They don't have to pay for it.
That's fair. Yeah, it just goes to that neighborhood at that point, and they have to deal with it at
Yeah,
that stage.
So there's a lot of places I think that we could save money. One really bad thing that Burgum did was he turned human services into a large corporation. So just like you call a large corporation and they say, we are receiving more than the usual number of calls for the 250th day this year, there's a 3-hour wait. That's what he did to human services.
Okay.
And so there were more calls not answered every day than there were actually answered.
Wow.
And then you had these people who were high school graduates who'd gone through this training, and they were supposed to be familiar with every program in the human services.
Nice.
And then they were supposed to just refer people to the right person.
place.
And I had social workers telling me sometimes they weren't even getting the referral till after the time had already passed where they were supposed to have taken action.
Yikes.
And then now they've been doing a thing because they can't keep people in the call center. They're forcing the social workers to rotate through the call center.
Okay.
All right.
And it's been just a disaster. It was where you had this professional, they had this portfolio of cases, and they worked on them.
Sure.
Now it's supposed to be, you just get any old social worker, and it's all the same. So
fine.
they're not familiar with the family, they're not familiar with the history. If it's not written in the file, they don't know. It
They're
really
social
hurts
workers,
services
so they'll figure it out, right?
with time.
And that's the thing. That's where you see so much of that delay come in then.
It comes in time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of the probably huge discussion points that comes up in the state a lot is education, and you've already kind of talked about it with the property taxes and that filtering down. But also, there's a feeling that the public school system in North Dakota doesn't always do the best, and perhaps it's a funding thing. And we were talking a little bit about that beforehand. And then in the legislature this time around, there was a couple of education savings accounts bills that were highly. It seemed like one of them did pass, got vetoed, and then the second one did not pass, and there was probably a reason for that. Kind of give us some insight into this.
Where I am on this is times change a lot. I mean, the Constitution was written, but I believe it's pretty clear that the funds weren't to go to private schools. Now, it's a two-part thing. The Constitution, our Constitution says can't go to secular schools, religious schools, but the main decision by the Supreme Court said you can't discriminate on religion. So if you give a private school money, they all get money.
Sure.
Right.
And I just believe if that's what you want, and there's obviously a lot of people want that, put it on the ballot and let us vote. Because all that's going to happen is you put it on the ballot, then the other people have to put it, or You pass it, the other people have to do it, and you're just wasting time. If you're not going to be able to pass it at the ballot box, you're not going to get it.
Okay.
The other thing is charter schools.
Yeah, that one
Why
did
is it
pass.
all these people who think that the Department of Public Instruction is doing a terrible job managing public schools suddenly think if we call a public school a charter school that everything will be better?
Right.
It's more streamlined and specific.
Well,
so
you know, and let's look now. The money follows the students. So we're
Yep.
talking $14,000. Let's say we pass the charter school thing and 2 charter schools open up in Minot and taking 1,200 students. Look at what that does to the funding for Minot Public Schools.
Yep.
You've already probably signed your contracts for the year. Depending on how it goes, you know, you don't have many ways to reduce your spending at that point. And then one day, and this happens all the time, could be in the middle of the school year, the charter school goes, we're not making it, and they close the door. And now you got to bring those students back into your public school.
you got to work it back
So
in.
going back to like the funding, if the state is supposed to pay for the public school system and supposed to keep this going, then how come every year on my property tax bill, I have to pay for it?
The biggest part of your property tax bill.
Yeah, one of the biggest parts of my property tax bill, I have to pay for public schools, and the state's supposed to be taking care of it.
Yeah, well, the history, it started out where, you know, every township had a township school and two sections of land that they paid for that school with. And over time, you know, there was no money from the state at that point. And over time, the state started putting some money in. And it's back to the interpretation of the wording, provide for a uniform system. Well, clearly the system we have is not uniform now.
Right. Yep.
You know, and one of the ways we could make things more uniform is basically to put the state in charge, but people don't trust the state.
No.
Sure.
No.
That's
Yeah,
the
that's
basic
the big
problem.
caveat
Right.
to it. Yeah.
Yeah, and with pretty good reason in many cases. You know, so you know, how do you do this? So what did finally happen after many years is the percentages went way up. You know, and I don't really have a problem with reasonable property taxes.
Right.
But then what happened was houses started popping up in price a lot. And so 60 mils now compared to when this first started is a lot more dollars
Yeah.
at the end of the year.
100%.
And then the big problem a property tax runs into is basically, unless you're putting it in escrow at the bank, is it comes and you got to write one check out at the year
Right.
and
Yep.
here it is.
Yep. Right.
So even the people who got $500 on their income tax last time, they wrote the check out on their property tax and then they got the credit on their income tax. So they're going, how come I'm paying all this property tax?
Yep.
Well, the state was
Yeah.
paying a big portion of that.
Right.
So, you know, I was really happy when I was in the legislature that the legislature didn't make me stand in the courthouse and hand the checks out to everybody. You know, we just got to put that little
Person by
thing on
person,
there. You know.
Right. Yeah.
Every constituent gets their handout from their state legislature.
So, and it kind of goes back to what you're saying about eliminating property or income tax. It's one of the maybe undesired and unrealized byproducts of that is that it inflated without doing anything, without an increase in property taxes, inflated property taxes, because it's like we pay, you know, I get a refund from my state income tax and I pay an outrageous amount in property tax.
Right. Right. And it's not that much on your income tax. And the big ones who really benefit from it are the out-of-state corporations who are here, and we even allow them to do really favorable things in their bookkeeping that they're not paying very much at all. So you have the Ma and Pa on Main Street, they're paying a lot of taxes, but the large corporation out at the mall, not so much.
No.
Right. And so Linda Page says, now that the cell phone law is in place, hopefully that will assist the teachers to actually be teachers, no distractions. But the bell-to-bell cell phone ban is something that came with great conversation and discussion. And some people felt like it should be taken care of at the local level, not the state getting involved in this. Do you think it would have been possible for it to be taken care of at local levels?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah? And it should have been probably?
Yeah, and most locals were taking care of it pretty well. Some aren't.
Okay.
It's just like I know some schools in the state are still having a big problem with students vaping during class.
Wow.
Well, that's not
During-
legal.
During
Yeah, that's not legal.
Yeah.
Not just
well,
in
there's
school,
so many
but-
different hidden things that you can have.
This
you
is
know?
a great point, though, because the legality of something does not mean that it won't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so now I can't have my cell phone, but the school probably gave me an iPad.
Yeah.
Well, everyone has a laptop in mine at
A
public
laptop.
schools. Yeah.
Or I have a watch that I
Smartwatch,
can
which
dial on. Is the
may
teacher going to check my watch to
Right.
see? You know,
Yeah.
so and this is all evolving. And so I think chiseling it into state law isn't really, it's bell to bell. Okay, so the football team's getting on the bus at 1:30. Can they
Bell
take
has
their
it
cell
right,
phone
yeah.
with them or
Right.
not?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Do they?
It just opens up so many little semantics of it all
Yeah.
when you really start diving into it.
And I
with
think,
that.
to be honest, I think it's another law that we passed that nothing's ever going to be done with it.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's the biggest part with it. It's,
And
Good
I have
point.
problems with laws that don't get enforced.
Yeah. Right.
I
yeah.
don't like that.
Yeah. No, that's fair.
No.
You
And I
shouldn't.
see it a lot where we get a differential enforcement, where say like some of the drug laws, where I had constituents that if you put 4 or 5 of them in a car and started driving around, they got checked.
Okay.
At the same time, pretty much every city had a unwritten list. I know one city wrote it down actually of people that you don't stop these people.
Oh, interesting.
not
You
worth
look the other way.
Not worth
and then,
stopping.
if you're high enough up, you have your state's attorney has to decide whether to charge you, what to charge you with. No, so effectively, some of these laws, that's a frustration. Many of the laws really don't apply to many of the people in the legislature.
Sure. Yeah, it's a
So does that, you don't checklist? Does that go by license plate, or how do they stop
Once
them?
in a while they screw up, and then stop,
And then they're like, oh yeah, go ahead, just continue on your way.
Well, there's always that option on the part of the
Yeah.
officer.
Right.
And
Yeah.
always just
There's
offer
all
a
these
verbal
off ramps
warning.
in the
Yeah.
criminal system.
That's
you
right.
know.
And that's a bigger notion that I think we were probably going to dive into here in a little bit.
We're going to jump into a
was gonna
break
say
though,
that's okay.
and then we can come back after that. We'll be back in 60 seconds.
In the demanding world of oil and gas, precision, safety, and efficiency are non-negotiable. Unmanned operator drone services revolutionizes how you monitor, inspect, and manage your operations. With cutting-edge technology and expert operators, we deliver real-time data, detailed reports, and actionable insights for our valuable clients. Why risk the safety of your team or waste precious time? Our drones access even the most challenging areas with ease, reducing downtime and enhancing safety across your sites. We take the guesswork out of your projects by offering LiDAR, mapping, and inspection services so that your projects stay safe, on budget, and on time. Unmanned operator drone services, where technology meets safety, precision, and efficiency. Contact us today to elevate your operations. Yes, pun intended.
We are back.
It's time. We're live again. Wait, we always were live. We never stopped being live. It just wasn't live on
No,
us.
you're crazy. So Marie says, what happens in school stays in schools. We need classroom surveillance for safety and accountability. That would be a huge step up.
Would be
That would take a lot of work to get into place. There would be some good school board meetings on that one.
I feel like that would have. Gosh, would that be a district by district thing, or would that be like
Yeah.
a statewide thing?
I mean, cell phones is
It's a state, that's what I'm saying. So, like, the state would have to be sending someone into every classroom to.
Well,
I mean,
it could just be a profit center for Google because they know where every phone is.
exactly
already.
right.
There you go. Okay, that's reasonable. Just get a contract with Google.
Third grade has 2 phones in it.
Yeah.
Right. They already know. Just be paying them for the data. All right. So you go ahead and lead us into this next place.
We were kind of starting to dabble into it with some of the ethics things that are going on. We're talking a lot about laws that are in place, but maybe don't always get enforced.
Yeah, and I know at the beginning of every legislative session, the legislators have a presentation where it's going through, and this is the things that are expected of you ethically.
Oh, wow.
And then the problem comes that people are people, and not everybody stays within the guidelines.
Mm-hmm.
And then how do you actually enforce it? The state's attorney of Burleigh County, I don't think she's going to get in there and start swinging.
Right.
That's a lot of
The
fight.
the leadership has incentives to keep it quiet.
So when you say that with the in a Burleigh County, basically what you're saying is because that's where the legislative session's happening, she would be the one that would have to enforce all that stuff.
Yes, according to Wayne Stanium's Attorney General opinion.
Okay,
Yes.
interesting.
Think Drew Wrigley would have a different opinion?
You'd have to ask him.
You'd ha-
I can't ask him that one
That's
anymore.
fair.
That's a good answer.
So.
Yeah, interesting.
But that's binding on officials until it's either ruled wrong in court or a different opinion.
Right. Yeah. That's actually pretty intense. Like, who would want to be the person that's going to sit there and be like, "Oh, you were violating this"? Like, there's no way you're going to want to do that for the entire legislative
Well, if you had a
body.
good manipulator, they could probably really do well for themselves.
suppose.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't think she's
Yeah.
got her fingers in stuff like
Right,
that.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't think, I wouldn't want to cast those type of aspersions.
Not saying
Yeah.
anything like that. No, just generally, it would be a big.
And Burleigh County, why should Burleigh County have to pay for the enforcement? If nothing else, they should get funding available to them. If they're expected to enforce state officials and legislature and stuff, there should be, here's the funding, or at least on a contingent basis for, some of this stuff runs into a lot of cash.
Right.
Yeah,
right,
without a
yeah.
doubt.
Absolutely.
And especially the further you have to start digging into something too,
Yeah.
the longer it's going to take, the more it's going to cost.
Yeah, so I don't think Burleigh County should be responsible, so to speak. I would actually be in favor of having a independent council, across the state with different state workers and stuff for not necessarily just criminal stuff, but some of this ethical stuff and everything. And I have problems with some of the things that are still happening, like I got mad because I see legislators who vote against feeding the kids. Then I see the legislators stay at a hotel that breakfast is included in the hotel, and then they charge the state for breakfast.
Okay.
I have a problem with that.
That's a little.
And
that's
if
a
you
walk
look,
around.
NDSU has a very clear policy on it, and I've been told they check up too. You can go out for breakfast, like if you have a breakfast meeting, or you have a reason you can't eat, what's that, the stuff, but you're supposed to put a note there. And it
Gotcha.
could be the same way. I think there's a lot of money between not just the legislature. OMB policy is written so poorly on this that it's basically all those state employees could be charging for breakfast when the state already bought them a breakfast. I don't think legislators should get 2 breakfasts when school kids get none.
Okay.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair take. And how would you be able to better enforce then those state legislators taking those extra, I don't want to say handouts, but those extra incentives that they take advantage of?
Well, like I say, it's like you stay at the hotel. It's included in the hotel. If you go out for a business meeting or something like that, you write a little note on there. It's not complicated. If you don't write the little note, what happens at NDSU is they call you and say, "Why did you charge us for this breakfast?"
Sure.
And they're under exactly the same state policy as the legislature is.
There you go. Just having someone to enforce that at that point.
Yeah,
then.
and that to me is a reasonable policy. They spell it out. OMB spells it out. Like if you go to a conference and your meals are included in the conference fees, you're not supposed to charge for those meals. They already paid for it. And a few years ago, the auditor, when he audited the land department, he found that people were being taken out to supper by people doing business with the state, and then they were charging the state for that supper on their expense account.
Oh, nice.
Okay.
And he said, that's
Okay.
double dipping. We're
Yeah.
paying for that when we pay that contract to that contractor. The employee shouldn't be charging us for what's already been paid for through that contract. But as far as I know, after his report, that basically all went away and nobody checks any of that anymore.
And it's just, for lack of a better term, gets swept under the rug at this stage.
Yeah. And
But you brought a interesting topic in the legislature this time, and that was the school lunches being paid for. And obviously, you're making the point for the legislators; they get their everything paid for, and school kids don't get much. Where does that end, though? Like, should the legislators be getting their stuff paid for? Maybe they should have to pay for their lunch, and the school kids should have to pay for their lunch, or how should this go about?
Well, there's been the general thing of employees, and like legislators, if you live too close to Bismarck, you don't get your meals. But in general, you're on the job, and some people, it should be more, and realize that during the legislative session, you don't get meals.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay.
I think it used to be the lobbyist is going to take you out and feed you anyway.
Yeah,
just wait around long enough. You'll have
no,
one of them wander
no more
up to
fun
you.
anymore. No reason to be in the legislature. But you see, actually, and I shouldn't actually kid like that probably. What actually happened was up until Trump took away a tax break, the legislators during the legislative session, and this is where the don't adjourn for more than 4 days came from.
Okay.
You got a tax credit at the government rate, federal government rate, for those days you were in session in the legislature.
Really?
Okay.
So the people who had big houses that were deducting stuff, they actually were getting their meals paid for.
Okay. I see.
I never got my meals paid for.
Yeah. I don't think I would either.
We were just a standard deduction family.
Sorry.
Yeah,
it
too
doesn't-
bad.
yeah.
And then Trump did that one. It was where he took away the uniforms for the union guys when they're on the road and all that stuff. Well, the other thing it did was it took away that tax credit for legislators.
Okay.
That's when the talk of we should pay for legislative meals during session started happening.
Heating up. Yeah.
Because there were these guys who they'd always had this tax credit.
Right.
And suddenly they did, and it, I figured it up. It was $5,000-6,000 tax credit.
Wow.
Which wasn't everything, but it was something. And stuff. And that's when they started talking that they should have meals during session. Honestly, I kind of think they should.
Yeah. No, I
It's fair.
understand.
Yeah, generally speaking, I don't think there's an issue with that. It's
Yeah,
when
but they
it gets
don't
taken
get it
advantage-
today.
Yeah.
They don't get it today. And I used to always joke that I just wish as a legislator I could get paid what people think I get paid.
So that brings up another point then. Do you,
But I want to continue on this
Go
for a
ahead.
minute.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Because that talks about the legislative side, but for the school lunch side, why should school lunches be paid for?
Well, a lot of it is it creates a lot of work.
Okay.
Every kid's got a bill. These parents haven't paid.
Okay.
Do we give them a cold lunch? Do we give them a different lunch? And stuff. And honestly, I'd like to see the school lunch program run a little different. I don't think breakfast should be cereal and pancakes and French toast. I think it should be bacon and eggs.
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
That's
Right.
what's healthy.
Yeah.
And and stuff. But it is true, and I could see it in some of the families. I can remember I knew one family that when the kids would show up there on Monday, the cooks would have to cut them off because they would just eat and eat and eat because literally their parents did not feed them the entire weekend.
Right. Yeah.
and that's
so-
never fun to see.
But of
and
course,
yeah.
we have the reduced price meal program. Some people who are eligible won't fill out the paperwork. And really, when we're talking about every kid getting it, mostly we were talking about adding in the kids that their parents make enough that they wouldn't do it. But it's costly to have kids,
Oh,
and we need to have kids.
They are necessary.
So,
Do you think it should be paid for by the Legacy Fund?
well, a lot of stuff's paid for by the Legacy Fund. My biggest concern with the Legacy Fund right now is the Constitution's clear that you can spend earnings, and you can't spend principal unless two-thirds majority in both houses. But now the legislature went and changed the law that
They're good at
earnings
that.
aren't earnings.
Oh.
Earnings are 7% of the balance
Okay,
over the
I did
last 5 years.
Sure.
Okay.
So if the Legacy Fund this year now would lose 20%, they'd still just take 7% of the average, which to my way of thinking is actually principal
Yeah.
that the Constitution as originally passed said you can't spend.
Which isn't good.
Now, if they did the same thing that they do with the land department with the schools, they do kind of an actuarial where they average the earnings out over multiple years, but it's still based on actual earnings,
Okay.
and that smooths things out to a great extent.
Sure.
And if you remember last session, we were at 7%, and part of it is because it keeps growing is the 7% has been low enough that it hasn't been an issue. But they wanted to go to 8% last time.
Okay.
So it's always this creep for more and
Wanna
more.
Just take a little bit
And
more.
now we just become, okay, we start doing all these programs out of Legacy Fund, and then what happens when we have a hiccup?
Yeah.
I mean,
There's
we
no
in
more-
our retirement funds and stuff, we lost 40% one biennium.
Wow. Wow.
Wow.
That
And we
hurts.
couldn't even audit it.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy.
They wouldn't let us audit it.
Really?
Yeah, and the guy who was running the program talked to our chief advisor all afternoon, went home and hung himself in his garage.
Yikes.
Oh, that's terrible.
You know?
That's hard.
And the thing was, we had, well, it depends on where it was on the books. At that time, the board would make investments. A couple guys in silk suits would get off the jets in Bismarck, and they'd throw $50 million at them, $100 million. We had like $115 million in a business that didn't exist.
Wow.
that the board had done this. And we would have never known about it, but it made the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
I'll get you.
That's news.
And here's the sad part. By the time the regulators were done and they liquidated everything that was still left, that business that didn't exist didn't do any worse than the rest of the portfolio.
Wow.
And we had tons of derivatives. Now, the derivatives were only legal if they were used for insurance. But we
Gotcha.
got no money from these derivatives. So as far as I can tell, all of our investors were insuring against the stock market going up.
Wow.
They're just constantly shorting the market effect.
Trying to double down.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So it's just, and then over time it did different things. They started paying out like as much as 20% of and that was, I called it the Las Vegas gamble. You might as well, you got a good fee up front, and then you got like 20% if you beat the average. So you might as well gamble it all,
At that
baby.
point, why not risk it?
And it's gotten, honestly, it's better today with the way they're doing things.
Okay.
The fees are more reasonable and stuff. But that was the thing, like Nevada in their fund, they just figure out what they want for the allocation, and then one state employee goes into no-load mutual funds, buys them, does the allocation,
Okay.
and that's all it is. And over the long term, they're beating us.
Wow. Interesting. Gordy says, how about a lot less spending and cut the size of government? That's kind of the drift that I'm kind of feeling from this.
You get this, just should be less, just should be more. The hard part in government is spending the right money.
Yeah, right.
Spending it when it should be spent. You know,
Yep.
if you can help some kid and then you receive benefits for many years from that, that's good money to spend. And that's kind of the problem. What's happening in the federal government right now is it's this hatchet just eliminating. It's not done like it was done during the Clinton years, where they actually studied it, and then the proposals went to Congress, and Congress passed it, and they shrunk government.
The last actual budget that was passed was in the Clinton years.
The balanced budget, yeah.
2000, I think.
But the Clinton was actually a study in how to properly do it. To just walk in and say, oh, everywhere the word old shows up, we're cutting that. You know, I mean, it's nonsense.
But from my understanding, since then, it's been just these budgets that have been passed to avoid shutdowns. That we haven't had a full annual budget passed since the Clinton era.
Well, they really don't pass there's the spending bills. They really don't pass a budget up front like they're supposed to.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
That's part of
that's
the
a
reason
problem.
why the national debt skyrocketed too.
The biggest reason was when the Democrats balanced the budget, they all got thrown out of office and the Republicans got put into office. So we taught Washington that debt doesn't count. What counts is taxes.
Yeah.
So we got people
Right.
that want a lot of government and no taxes.
And no taxes. Well, but we don't want a lot of government. We want government where we want it.
Well,
So-
we
so-
want government for ourselves. You
So-
know, that's the thing is, he's going to cut everything, but not me.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
That's so much.
And
of the
government
issue.
isn't that big when you take care of the poor and infrastructure. Government isn't that big. It's when everybody else sticks their hand out and says, where's my share of that money?
Right. Absolutely.
No, that's an interesting point. And so, going off of similar vibes with that, what is something like the Theodore Roosevelt Library? Is that a worthwhile expenditure, or?
Who knows? You know, I think some people think it's going to generate a lot of traffic for Medora, and I think Medora is going to generate some traffic for the library. I mean, if you go most of the presidential libraries, you almost can hear the crickets in them,
Right,
and stuff.
yeah.
There's a couple exceptions, but do I really think that people are going to just beat a path to Medora, North Dakota, to look at the Teddy Roosevelt Library? No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
The people, they're few and we are few and far between that would be interested in something like that.
You know, if I'm there,
100.
if I go to Teddy Roosevelt Park and I'm there, I got my lifetime pass. Doesn't
You're
cost me
ready.
anything.
You're ready to
You
go.
know, I'm set. I'll probably stop by the library and
For
walk
sure.
through it. But to
a
just
good
say,
point.
the library's done, I'm going to drive to Medora now to go look at the library? No.
So
No.
on a personal basis, and maybe this will be very telling of myself, I think it'd be cool to go to the Ronald Reagan Library, right? Presidential Library. But I don't think I'll ever plan a vacation around it.
Right.
I will.
That's fair.
It would. The only way that I'd visit it is if I was going to be in the area and be like, oh, I could visit that. It's not
I've been at
bucket list.
Truman's.
Okay. Yeah.
You know,
You're telling me you don't
that was
want to
pretty quiet.
Yeah. You don't want to plan a trip to Grover Cleveland's presidential library?
I don't think so.
You know, but the thing that makes me kind of mad was, here we want $50 million to jumpstart our endowment, and that's all we'll ever ask for.
Yeah. Well,
And now they're back asking for another 50 from us. They've got Hoven and Kramer putting a $50 million bill in the federal level.
part of it.
And the tourism department sends millions in grants to them. They have no intention of ever stopping asking for money.
if we'll know one thing about North Dakota, it's that we have very clean money trails, and everything's on the up and up there. Okay.
There's no issues with where the money comes from and
Yeah.
goes to.
Right.
Yeah, and the thing is, I remember when they closed all our rest areas up here, and people asked me, how come they're closing our rest areas? I said, because they're not a good place to put literature from Medora in.
Okay. That's reasonable.
Yeah.
Makes it for a little more of a.
Normally, we don't have a rest area in North Dakota unless you can see the Tesoro sign.
Yeah.
That's true though.
Yeah.
I mean, how many are there even anymore between Minot and Grand Forks? I think there's one.
There's
none
a couple,
between Minot and Bismarck.
There's a couple on 94.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Between Bismarck and
just
Fargo.
a couple.
Yep. It's one or two. Yeah.
Instead of there used to be. I mean, there was one between Minot and Surrey back in the day. Even.
I always thought we could bid it out. Some
not
truck
rugby.
stop would become the official rest area, and we would throw the toilet paper in for the use.
Okay.
And, oh, here I got a generator. Matter of fact, I even thought at one time of creating a line of truck stops that the name of them was rest area. Then we could put rest area 20 miles.
Yeah,
That's perfect.
That's funny. Yeah.
that's a great workaround for it.
Yeah.
No, that's golden. Man.
So, but yeah, I don't know, but that's, it just, and it's interesting, like traveling through other states, a lot of states make a differentiation between a visitor center and a rest area.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
We were in one in Wyoming that the whole Triceratops was there. So it was,
Wow,
it was quite.
That is pretty neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty neat.
Yeah, it's got to be hard for marketing tourism to North Dakota. It's got to be hard. Yeah. So
Especially now when the Canadians aren't coming.
Yeah.
We got
exactly.
Josh DeMel. That's it.
No,
Well, he tells everybody how nice his Minnesota lake cabin
Yeah,
is.
exactly.
That's the thing, though.
Yeah.
All of his posts are from the Minnesota North Woods, and
Yeah, I was thinking for much as we're paying him, he shouldn't be able to use the word Minnesota.
This is a
he
problem.
can't publicly post the word Minnesota.
Yeah. I mean, why didn't we jump on like the Phil Jackson bandwagon, or why don't you ever hear the home of Louis L'Amour, or there's some other neat things about North Dakota than just Josh DeMel.
Yeah, you'd think there at Jamestown you could have like a Louis L'Amour Interpretive Center.
Yeah, exactly.
They keep wanting to put that weird amusement park in.
Okay. Yeah.
Or something for Lawrence Welk or
Ride the
something.
buffalo
yeah,
or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah, ride the buffalo.
Right.
The great white buffalo.
All right. So we're coming to the end of our show, but also the legislative session is coming to an end. Supposedly, we already talked about
Praise
that.
the Lord.
Yeah, exactly. So, in the last couple of weeks, are there any surprises or any things that you anticipate coming out?
It's almost impossible to follow what's going on if you're sitting right there in the building.
Yeah.
And it's all these different conference committees, and they're sliding amendments back and forth. And then basically it gets effectively in the past, it's always just gotten rubber stamped when it gets to the floor. It's been very rare to take the big spending bills and send them back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to.
And it's and the frustrating part is often things that were killed earlier, sometimes several times, will show back up
As an
in
amendment.
these. I would not be surprised to see school vouchers pop on one of these bills.
Yeah. Right.
As an amendment on
Yeah.
like 1176 or something.
Yeah.
That's
Interesting.
Fair.
I just felt like that bill, 1176, should have been like 1776. It just always stands out to me.
Yeah, that's fair. It would have been perfect. The optics of it.
Yeah, it would have been.
One thing that we haven't discussed yet that we said we were going to touch on was HB 1318, the pesticide bill that passed.
The Monsanto
Good
thing.
job.
Yeah. What is your general opinion on that one?
Well, we had the great Monsanto wars when we were fighting over Roundup Ready wheat and things like that. And boy, money flowed in Bismarck. We thought we could actually get money from the Convention Visitors Bureau to put Monsanto bills in because of how much money flowed when
Just
they would
from
show
the sheer amount of.
And what happened was they were in court, they were getting sued, and they lied, and they got caught lying. And now everybody and his brother standing in line, getting this money. And I'll tell you, I don't think a homeowner who bought 2 quarts of Roundup over the last 20 years should get a dime.
Yeah.
It's not that dangerous. I was a consultant. compared to most people, I took baths in
that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yes. And I'm not saying I'm in perfect health, but anyway, but
You're
it's
not dead either.
It's not Roundup's fault, and you've gotten like this whole group that just attack Roundup. Like I can remember out in, I think it was Oregon, where they said, oh, we found GMO sugar beet seedlings in the compost at the farm store. If you've seen how a sugar beet seedling shrinks down when it dries down, the only way you would have found that is if you put them there.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Gotcha.
They've suffered from fraud as well. And there is a problem with the way things are done. I mean, the ones that's going to be huge is the GLP-1 weight loss drugs. There's going to be so many lawsuits over them over time.
Yeah.
And the question is, if you are actually fully informed and you decide to take the risk, do you really get to run in and sue?
Right.
But this is what we've done. It's like when we fixed liability tort reform in North Dakota, that was only the doctor.
Sure.
But if the doctor tripped on your step in your house, he gets to sue you.
Yep.
Right.
And Indiana, where they complain about it, the Supreme Court has thrown out tort reform for doctors like 4 or 5 times because that's a special class of people. It's equal protection. You can't do this for them. Same way I would say with these pesticides is you can't rightfully just say pesticide companies can't be sued. That's my problem.
On the flips, that's the hard thing. It's the people that are taking the risk of buying these things. They're taking that risk. Yeah. But to give the companies a blanket where you can't.
Well, if I'm a housing development out here now, I can't sue Bayer or Monsanto. Oh, but I can sue the farmer who sprayed it. He's the one who actually exposed me to it. He's the one who decided to do that.
If it weren't for him spraying the crops, I would never have been exposed.
And I would never have been exposed.
And that's where I think so many of the issues with this come up are.
Yeah. So I think it was introduced in like 30 states. And I think in the end, there might be one other state passes it, but I think North Dakota has a real good chance to be the only one.
We were the first for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, it's been a good conversation. Coachman for North Dakota governor says they should do the maximum 50 bills per session. That would really change things up a little bit, really consolidate things. But I really appreciate you coming on.
It was interesting, and we talked other topics maybe sometime. And
we'll have to do it again.
You just wind me up and I go.
Yeah, I like it. It's a good time.
It's already been an hour. Time flies when we're having fun.
So very good.
Any final thoughts before we head out?
Well, I don't know that we're ready for final thoughts on the legislative session until we actually see what they actually end up doing.
Bring you back in a few weeks, maybe. When done.
And even then, I'm not sure we'll know. I do think we'll probably be in special session with what's happening on the federal level. I would guess at least twice. In the next biennium. I think they'll have to make adjustments as we go along. They'll probably limit it to spending, but I think I'm expecting special sessions.
Very good. Well, we'll look forward to those, I guess.
Yeah.
All right. Sounds good. Well, thanks for watching this episode. We'll be back on Tuesday at 9 a.m. for some more discussion here at the Dakota. Thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.